Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 207, Your Next Writing Year, Part 2. Last week, we talked about thinking of your writing year as the actual calendar year, so from January to December, and using the time in December to do a little bit of revisiting about how much writing you actually got accomplished, what projects were completed, what projects weren't completed, and so on. And it's a good way to really look at the whole of your writing happening alongside actual calendar time, not academic year time. So as I mentioned in the last episode, academics typically think about the beginning of the year as August or September, whenever their actual academic year starts. That's when lots of new writing resolutions are made and new scholarship kind of opportunities come up. There's times for, call for papers and conferences and all that sort of thing. But what I would argue is that this opportunity at the end of December to really look at writing, how it happens over the course of the calendar year, is also a useful way to look at it. For one, I sort of like it because it's the end of the year and nobody can argue with time. So for example, December 31st, 2024, that's the last day in December of 2024. Like nobody's going to argue about that. So it's one of those things that you either completed the work in that time frame or you didn't. Whereas if we use August as a marker to kind of figure out, oh, these are the writing projects that I want to do, faculty members, surprisingly, and graduate students as well, tend to be a lot more optimistic in August that, oh, I'm going to do all these things and it's going to be amazing. December is more of a sobering time. It's just the same thing as when we think about making other kinds of resolutions. I talked about that a little bit in the last episode too, like how December sometimes is a time to say, okay, well, in the new year, I'm going to start eating right, or I'm not going to drink any more Coca-Colas, or whatever the thing is that you're trying to do or not do. So what I want to talk about this week is to talk about how I'm thinking about my next writing year. Because the writing year, if I tie it to the calendar, that starts in January. And so one of the opportunities that you have from some of our workshops and our webinars and things like that is to participate in our January workshop series. I'm really excited for it to get some writing completed the first month of your next writing year. So you can look in the show notes for a link to how to sign up for that. But I also want to let you know what I'm thinking about and how I'm making some of those distinctions. So I am going to share a screen again where you can actually look and see what we are doing in terms of what I am doing in terms of how I'm going to think through my writing year in 2025. Because since it's nice and shiny, it's a brand new year, it hasn't started yet, I can really think through, okay, well, how do I want to do this? And in this case, I know I've mentioned that I think through specific writing projects in semesters, and I do kind of divide them up and say, okay, these are projects I want to do from the beginning of the spring semester to spring break. These are projects I want to do from spring break to the end of the spring semester, and so on. But for this exercise, which is just sort of an optimistic, setting some resolutions, thinking through how do I want some of this stuff to play out, I actually do these by month, and then I get into the specifics, like how these are going to play out. So I've already talked about in a previous episode about how I already started thinking about January. And so I'm showing a screen, again, in my Penzu notebook, but you don't need Penzu. You can use whatever you want. It's just basically a document where I have this stuff listed. A couple of weeks ago, I showed what I'm planning for January 2025, like how I'm starting to think about when am I actually going to do some writing? How many days a week do I have? What schedule constraints do I have? Those sorts of things. But in this one, when I'm thinking about my writing year, I'm just looking through and saying, okay, well, what are some things I want to knock out each month if possible? And so what I repeated on the top of this, for those of you looking on screen, you can see it, but I have a list of some projects I want to do in January. And then I also, for people that didn't see that other list of some writing rules and some new tools and things like that, that I want to make sure I have in place by January, I also put that up on screen. So if you ever want to see this episode, you can see it in YouTube, but I'll give an audio overview. So in January, what I said I wanted to do was I want to knock out this book proposal that I need to do for my sabbatical book. I need to finish these interview questions and get Institutional Research Board approval. So I need to submit that for an article I'm working on. And then I have to give a talk at the end of the month at Ohio State. And this is on some work that I did as a visiting scholar there in the spring. So I know those are three things that I have. And I've talked in a previous episode about just some of my writing rules, about how Monday I kind of have this nice chunk between 9 and 12. So I want to make sure I'm always using Mondays to get some writing done, and I've got some other things on there. And then I talked about some other tools and resources I need to have in place by January. So actual physical items. February, once I get there, I started talking about in the last episode how I had one thing that did not make it in my review of my writing over the calendar year was I never completed this 80% complete article. And yes, I know I did a podcast on how we should all complete those 80% jobs. So this is one of the times where I didn't do it either. So one of the things you hear on the podcast is real life writing. This is real life writing. I didn't do it. It's not my favorite project. I keep putting it off, but I know I need to do it. So what I've decided, and this is going to make a great episode, I even put a little sneak peek note. So if you listen to our episodes, if you hear this again, you'll laugh. But I am going to make an episode called Use February to do an icky writing project. It's a short month, so I'm putting that project in that month. So I have to work on a conference proposal because it will be due by the end of that time probably. And then that project is going to be the only project I work on in February. I only get to work on that until it's completed. So those are 2 months I already have on here. And then I've got, like, if I would scroll down, you can see what I have kind of, I'm thinking for March, for April, and so on. This is not the way the writing will actually play out, but what this is allowing me to do is to think through writing projects and match them up with the actual calendar year time. So here's what I mean by that. I just said that February is a great month to do an icky writing project because there's fewer days. So there's fewer days you're spending on the icky writing project. But I also know when I look ahead to like June, I don't want to be writing in the library 12 hours a week. It's nice outside. Well, sometimes in Ohio, sometimes it's nice outside. It's not a time of year that I'm going to want to do that. So that's a month. You can't see it on screen right now, but if I would scroll down, that's a month where I thought, well, I really want to do another column for Inside Higher Ed. That would be a more fun project for me to do that I could put in that month where I know we have some family vacation and travel and some other things that just don't make that a great month for knocking out big pieces of work. I also have some of my scholarly reading mapped into that month. So, as you're making your New Year's resolutions, if you do them, you might just think through some writing projects you want to get knocked out in the year. Another way you might think about this is you might decide a priority list. You might say, I must, in this calendar year, knock out these 3 projects, whatever they are. Sometimes graduate students that have a dissertation will say, well, I must complete my dissertation this year. I would try to break that into a little bit smaller in terms of a goal or for pieces. So that way you can actually see progress as you get there. So maybe your 3 projects are chapters 3, 4, and 5. So you actually have the dissertation completed. For people that are working on, say, an edited collections take a ton of time. I really need to do an episode on those because I just finished another one and they just take a whole lot of time to be an editor. So, maybe one of the things that you'll do for that, maybe that's your goal is to complete it by the end of the year, but you really want to say, okay, these are my 3 big tasks. One is that I've read all 12 chapters in my edited collection and given all of the author's feedback. I've written section headings that coordinate all that work and so on. So, it's a good time to just take stock. And I know at some point in our December writing strategies, we just did that webinar, our free webinar for the month of December, just last week. But, a lot of people this time of year, one of the things I'll say is decide when you're not writing anymore. So for December, some people are quitting on the 23rd. They say, well, that's it. I'm not getting any more in the academic year. Once you have figured that out, one really good use of time, if you feel guilty about not working, is to just sit down and say, okay, 2025, it's a new year. What am I going to put in here to make it work? And one way that we might be able to help you is that I mentioned last week that we have a new January series out there about getting some writing wins in January and actually getting some work done. So the idea is that you can make real progress. You start working right away in January to get some real writing done. And we'll just do a variety of different things in this workshop series. So the way that our series work is we just meet once a week for an hour, different topic that kind of focuses on different things that we have going on. And you also can get these in a recording if the time doesn't work out for you. But the idea is that we have a place where we're all tracking our progress, we're accountable to each other, and it's a motivating group in addition to giving you some content on how to get some of these things completed. Because one thing I do know after supporting faculty, this will now be my 21st or 22nd year that I've been supporting faculty writers at my institution. One of the things I do know is that people that don't get any writing done in January, or they decide, hey, I'm going to worry about my teaching for the first week of class, and maybe your semester doesn't start again until January 14th or 15th or something like that. If you don't start writing that first week of class, it's now January 22nd. So you have a little over a week in January to get some work done. So one of the things I do know is that getting started as early as possible in January when you've decided your first day of work is, because some of us have different length breaks and so on, but starting from right then, when you know the first day is that you can work, that's the first day you're working and you're actually getting some writing completed. We're really going to work with that in a positive, a way that just makes it very hands-on. What do I do? Okay, you're stuck on this project. Okay, here's some steps that you can take. Here's some things that everybody should try doing this week to kind of push their project forward. As mentioned on many of our Defend, Publish, and Lead episodes, we talk a lot about movement and completion. So that series will be a way to get there. And you can find it by going to Eventbrite and Defend, Publish, and Lead. And we will also have a link to register in the show notes because now it's up this week. Happy writing, everyone.